Welcome back everyone, it is Eric from Rare Candy, and today I'm back with another Scarlet and Violet deck profile, this time checking out the other big new deck that this set's giving us. That of course is going to be the brand new Gardevoir EX, which personally I'm pretty stoked on. I love stage 2 decks, I don't think that's a secret at this point, so fingers crossed that Gardevoir can live up to the hype and finally give us our first decent stage 2 deck in quite some time. But with that being said, there's definitely a lot of ways we can take Gardevoir EX. This has actually been kind of a tough deck to nail down a really solid list for. So at the end of this video, if you guys are hungry for some more Gardevoir content, I actually dropped a bonus article over on Patreon detailing some additional ways you can build around Gardevoir and a lot of other card inclusions that should be on your short list to potentially think about. I'll be sure to drop a link to that down below in the description. And also guys, just one more quick plug before we get into the list. If you're thinking about picking up any cards from Scarlet and Violet, friends of the channel over at flipsidegaming.com are still taking pre-orders on sealed product. Use coupon code RARECANDY for 10% off and you'll get free shipping too. But if Flipside is out of stock by the time you find this video, you can also use my affiliate link with TCGPlayer. They'll show you all of the next cheapest listings online, and it really does help support the channel too. So again, links to everything will be down below in the description. But let's check out this Gardevoir list. So to kick things off, we do have 4 copies of Ralts in the deck, as you would expect, but I actually do want to point out the Ralts we're using is actually kind of important too. This is going to be the one back from Astral Radiance, and it has 70 HP, which is pretty notable because if we choose to play these 60 HP Ralts, our opponent can actually use Sableye to knock out 2 Ralts at a time if we haven't evolved them. But also this one does have the Teleportation Burst attack. For just a single Psychic Energy, does 10 damage, and we switch this with one of our bench Pokemon. So obviously this is great just to keep our Ralts out of harm's way, but we also do have a pretty good Pokemon we can switch into in the early game, which we'll get to in just a moment. But up next from there, we also have 4 copies of Kirlia in the deck, which is such an important card for this refinement ability that allows us to discard a card from our hand and draw 2 cards. Just even generally, this is a great ability just to help find more cards in a given turn, but also because Gardevoir EX accelerates energy out of the discard pile, this is a great way at actually pitching away those energies while you're trying to set up your evolutions. But of course, up next from there, we do have 2 copies of Gardevoir EX, new Stage 2 Pokemon EX from Scarlet and Violet. Gonna have a whopping 310 HP, while of course only giving up 2 prizes. And the reason so many people are hyping up Gardevoir is for this ability. As often as you like during your turn, you can accelerate a Psychic Energy out of discard pile to one of your Psychic Pokemon. Each time you do this, they do take 2 damage counters, and you also can't accelerate energy to them if the 2 damage counters would knock them out. And also does have an attack of its own for 2 Psychic and a Colorist is 190 and heal any special conditions. This attack definitely isn't bad, it's a nice little 2-shotting number, and we sometimes can use Gardevoir if we need something that can just tank a little bit better, but most of the time we're actually using Gardevoir to power up other Pokemon rather than itself. The next Pokemon in our list is going to be a different Gardevoir. This lets us look at the top 2 cards of our deck, and we attach any basic energy we find there to our Pokemon in any way that we like, and we get to keep any additional cards that might not have been energy. So this can actually be another way at cheating energy into play if we don't yet have a ton in the discard to accelerate with our EX, but it's also just another draw card that we can use that has more HP than our Kirlias. And Gardevoir actually has a pretty decent attack as well for 3 colorless energy to 60 plus 30 more for each Psychic Energy attached. Now, having only 140 HP does sort of limit how many you can accelerate to Gardevoir with your EX that we have, but nevertheless, if you can maybe preemptively attach 1 or 2 energies in advance and combined with this ability, this actually can be an insanely heavy hitting card if your opponent's not expecting it. And the final piece of our Gardevoir evolution line is going to be 1 copy of the Buddy Catch Gallade. So this is another part of the Gardevoir evolution line with a broken ability. This one says once during your turn, you can search your deck for a supporter card and put it into your hand. We actually play a lot of different one-of supporters in this list, and Gallade does a great job at sort of helping enable the use of some of these one-ofs that we have. And Gallade also isn't a bad attacker either. For a Psychic and 2 colors, does 160, and you move an energy attached to it to one of your bench Pokemon. But yes, we are still playing other attackers outside of the Gardevoir evolution line. The first one's going to be a copy of Galarian Articuno. Articuno's ability is pretty cool. When you bench it from hand, you can attach 2 basic energies from your hand to the Pokemon. So this is maybe an alternate way to get this guy powered up a little bit quicker. But its attack for 2 Psychic and a Colorless has you discard its energy and does 120 to one of your opponent's Pokemon. As you can see, a lot of the attackers that we have access to are sort of based around 2-shotting your opponent, and Articuno can be a great way at picking off Pokemon on the bench without the need of something like a boss's orders. And because we have Gardevoir EX, we can actually recharge this attack to be able to use it multiple times in the course of a game. Up next from there, though, we do have a copy of Zacian V. This, of course, is going to be the one from Celebrations. Its ability says, once during our turn, we can search our deck for a basic Psychic Energy and attach it to one of our Pokemon, but we do have to end our turn. We're usually not playing this card for the ability, but if we do have to start with this guy, this can still be a decent ability to fall back on while we're getting set up in the opening turns. But more importantly, we're playing Zacian for this attack. It's actually the exact same attack that we have on the Shining Arcana Gardevoir, so 60 plus 30 for each Psychic Energy attached to it, but the big upside to Zacian is, of course, not only is it a basic Pokemon that's much easier to get into play, but also it has a lot more HP, which means our max damage cap with this card is significantly higher than the Gardevoir. With that being said, we also do have a copy of Weirdeer V as well, which is actually kind of similar to Zacian in terms of how it functions. Its attack does 40 times the amount of energy on Weirdeer, so a lot of the time you are hitting for kind of similar amounts of damage with these cards, but the big reason you would want to attack with Weirdeer in a turn instead of Zacian V in certain instances is because we're actually not taking damage with Weirdeer, since its Frontier Road ability takes the energy from your other Pokemon into play and puts it onto it. And in turn, this makes Weirdeer a much tankier attacker, especially against some of the small single prize Pokemon that the Lost Box decks play. Next up from there, we have 2 copies of Klefki. We are playing it for that very powerful ability that shuts off the abilities of basic Pokemon while it's in the active spot. So because we are a bit of a slower deck, we are taking 2 or 3 turns to really get a lot of our evolution Pokemon in play. It's nice to have a way to slow down some of these fast, aggressive decks like Mew V Max, Miraidon EX, and of course all of the different Lost Zone variants. And since we are playing the Klefki, this is another reason I really do like this particular Ralt, because it does have that attack that can just switch into it at the end of our turn. We have a copy of Radiant Greninja as our Radiant Pokemon of choice in the deck for, of course, that Concealed Cards ability. We can discard energy from our hand and draw 2 cards, which is perfect because we are sort of racing to just fill our discard pile with all of our energy cards. And our last Pokemon of the list is just going to be a single copy of Manaphy here just to protect our bench. We are kind of scared of opposing Radiant Greninjas and decks that can actually attack with that Moonlight Shuriken attack. So we want to make sure our different Ralts and Corollas are going to be protected until they can fully evolve. Getting into our support cards, we have 3 copies of Professor's Research just to discard our hand and draw 7. Like I said, guys, we do want Psychic Energy in the discard, and of course Research is probably the best supporter we have to help discard cards from hand. From there, up next we have a copy of Avery. We draw 3, and then our opponent is forced to discard their bench until they only have 3 Pokemon remaining. Even though the draw 3 effect isn't too great, you have to remember we do have the Corollas to sort of make up the difference and help us sort of supplement that draw power every turn. But forcing our opponent to discard down to 3 is actually really good against a number of different decks. Whether it's Mew V Max, Regieleki, or even like Gardevoir mirror matches, that discard effect is definitely going to hurt. For our next sort of like draw 3 style supporter, we do have a copy of Worker in the deck where you, again, just draw 3 cards, but this one has you discard a Stadium card in play. 2 stadiums in particular that are horrible for our deck to see are going to be both Lost City and maybe even more notably Path to the Peak. So while we do play some stadiums of our own, we definitely want to make sure we can bump these stadiums on the exact turns that we need them. And the reason I like Worker as a potential out is because we can not only search it out with Gallade, but also we do play a Powpat in this list, and this allows us a way at recycling one of our stadium bumping options. But next up from there, we have a brand new Scarlet and Violet supporter that is going to be Miriam. It has you shuffle up to 5 Pokemon from your discard pile into your deck and then draw 3 cards. So without Ordinary Rod in the format, this is definitely going to be our best Pokemon recovery card I think we can make use of. This allows us to get almost 2 entire Gardevoir lines back into our deck, whereas something like Clara might be a little bit more limiting in how many Pokemon you can get back. So up next from there, we have a copy of Judge, just to force us both to shuffle in and get 4, just for a little bit of disruption. And for later in the game, we also have a copy of Roxanne, so once our opponent has taken 3 prize cards, we can force both players to shuffle their hands into their deck, but they only get 2, whereas we get 6. So much like with some of these other one-of supporters, on the exact turn we really want to punish our opponent, we can search this out with our Gallade and put them down to that 2-card hand size. We have a copy of Serena in the deck. Of course, we can gust up our opponent's Pokemon V, which are still, of course, going to be popular after the rotation. So having the option to bring up a Pokemon V or use this as a draw card is definitely, I think, still worth the space in the list. And to round out our supporter cards, we just have 1 copy of Boss's Orders, just to choose exactly what we might want to bring up into the active spot. And for our stadium card of choice, we're playing 2 copies of the brand new Mesa Goza. Once during each player's turn, that player may flip a coin. If fed, search your deck for a Pokemon and put it into your hand. So yes, this is just Pokeball, but on a stadium, which might seem a little bit underwhelming, but you have to remember, even if you're flipping tails with this effect, you are still using this card frequently as a counter stadium to remove cards that otherwise would really be hurting your deck. Hopping on over to our item cards, up first we have Battle VIP Pass. We can only play the card on turn 1, but we get to search our deck for 2 basics and put them onto our bench. And even though this card isn't useful after turn 1, you do have to remember we do have that refinement ability on our Kirlias, which means even in the mid and late game when we can no longer use this card, we can easily just discard it to draw some more cards in a given turn. We also have 4 copies of Level Ball in the deck, another very important Pokemon search card. We can search a deck for a Pokemon with 90 HP or less and put it into our hand. This finds basically every important early game Pokemon in our deck because we can get Ralts, we can get Kirlia, but we can also even get things like Klefki or Manaphy if we want to get those in play as well. But that's definitely not the end of our Pokemon search cards. Up next in there, we have 3 copies of Fog Crystal. So with this, we do have the flexibility of grabbing a basic Psychic Pokemon, or we also can get a basic Psychic Energy. And our final Pokemon search card is just going to be 3 copies of Ultra Ball. We do have to discard 2 cards from our hand, but we search our deck for any Pokemon and put it into our hand. And honestly, we don't even mind the discard effect, guys, because of course we can discard our Psychic Energies, but also this allows us to discard excess copies of maybe Battle VIP Pass once we no longer need that card too. I think some people would naturally sort of gravitate to maybe a 4th copy, which I still could see, but honestly, Ultra Ball is not really a card I want to see until maybe like turn 3. And by playing the 4th copy, we might just be finding it a little too soon. We would definitely rather use these other Pokemon search cards in the early game to help get our Pokemon set up instead. From there, we have 2 copies of Rare Candy in the deck, and I've got to say, it definitely feels good to be able to play this in a deck once again. So even though we are playing the full 4 count of Kirlia, we are still going to occasionally need some ways to more quickly get into our stage 2s, and Rare Candy is going to allow us to skip that middle evolution and go straight into a Gardevoir EX, Gallade, etc. And our final item card is just going to be a copy of Palpad. As you guys can see, we are playing a lot of 1-of supporters in this list, and we are sometimes going to have to be discarding them with our refinement ability to get better set up. So Palpad, of course, just a great way to guarantee continued access to these different effects. And our final trainer card is just going to be a single copy of Sealstone in the deck, or Sky Sealstone, I should say. While it's attached to a Pokemon V, it gives them a V-Star power that allows them to take an additional prize if they knock out a Pokemon V Max or V-Star. So that means when we go up against some of these popular Pokemon in the post-rotation format, such as Mew V Max or Giratina V-Star, our Pokemon like Weirdeer and Zacian, when they do take these big KOs, are going to be able to grab an additional prize card, which actually can be really big since we are a bit of a slower deck. We are very rarely going to take the first prize, and this does sort of even the playing field a little bit and allow us to more quickly to get back in the game. And to round out our deck list, we have 11 basic Psychic Energy, which has felt like a really good sweet spot. I've tried lower counts, a little bit higher counts, but 11 feels like it allows us just enough Psychic Energy to sort of guarantee these big KOs with Zacian and Weirdeer, but not so much to where it prevents us from including other important cards in the deck. But that's where I'm going to be right now with Gardevoir EX. But honestly, we've seen a lot of different versions of this deck coming out of Japan. We've seen builds that use things like Mewtwo V Union, Shadow Rider Calyrex, and others. So I am definitely curious your thoughts on this list that I have here, and if there's any cards here that you think you might change. But like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, if you are itching to learn more about some of these alternate ways at building around Gardevoir, I'll be sure to drop a link in the description to that bonus article over on Patreon if you do want to get some bonus content and help support the channel in the process. But of course, if you did enjoy today's content, remember to leave a like on the video. And if you are feeling a little bit extra generous and do want to take that support to the next level, like I mentioned, you can become a patron, or you can also pick up some merch at rarecandytcg.com. But as always, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.